Smart scheduling tools have revolutionized how we trigger the Zeigarnik effect at optimal times throughout the day. These systems understand your natural energy patterns and automatically create strategic incomplete tasks when you're most likely to benefit from the psychological tension. Instead of leaving work unfinished randomly, the technology deliberately schedules partial task completion at moments when the cognitive pull will be strongest. These tools can detect when you're approaching a natural break in your workflow and suggest starting a new high-impact task without finishing it. They know from your historical data that you tend to have creative breakthroughs around 3 p.m., so they'll prompt you to begin outlining tomorrow's most important project at 2:45 p.m. By the time you reach your peak creative period, the incomplete task is already pulling your attention toward productive work. The scheduling systems also integrate with your email and messaging platforms to create Zeigarnik loops across different types of communication. They might draft the first paragraph of an important email and save it to your drafts folder, creating psychological tension that pulls you back to complete the message when your mental energy is optimal for that type of communication. Productivity analytics platforms now provide real-time tracking of your championship mentality progress by measuring long-term system building versus short-term task completion. These platforms distinguish between activities that feel productive in the moment and activities that actually build capabilities for future success. They track metrics like learning velocity, system improvements, and skill development alongside traditional productivity measures. The analytics can show you when you're falling into the trap of optimizing for daily metrics at the expense of long-term growth. They measure how much time you spend building reusable systems versus doing one-off tasks. They track your experimentation rate and learning outcomes from trying new approaches. Most importantly, they help you see the compound effects of championship-level thinking by correlating your system-building activities with long-term performance improvements. Automation eliminates the friction that typically prevents consistent application of these methods by removing the mental overhead of implementing the principles manually. Smart home technology can automatically prepare your environment for optimal productivity by adjusting lighting, temperature, and ambient noise based on the type of work you're about to begin. Your devices can switch to focus modes that eliminate distractions without requiring conscious decision-making. AI assistants can automatically break down large projects into smaller, incomplete tasks that trigger the Zeigarnik effect. They can schedule these microtasks throughout your week to maintain momentum on important projects. They can even generate initial drafts, outlines, or frameworks for creative work, so you always have something incomplete, pulling your attention toward high-impact activities. Specific applications available in 2025 make implementing these principles effortless by integrating all the functionality into seamless workflows. Platforms like Motion use AI to automatically schedule your most important work during your peak energy periods while creating strategic incomplete tasks to maintain momentum. Tools like Reclaim protect your focus time by automatically declining conflicts and rescheduling low-priority commitments. Analytics platforms such as Rescue Time have evolved to track not just time spent, but the impact and quality of different activities. They can automatically identify your personal Pareto zones and send alerts when you're drifting away from high-impact work. Knowledge management tools now include AI features that can automatically organize incomplete tasks and surface relevant information when you're ready to continue working on strategic projects. The concern that technology might become a distraction rather than an amplifier is valid, but the solution lies in thoughtful setup rather than avoiding these tools entirely. The key is configuring your digital environment to support your productivity goals instead of working against them. This means using automation to eliminate decision fatigue while maintaining conscious control over your most important choices. The integration strategies that connect all productivity tools into one seamless system focus on data flow and automated decision-making. Your calendar, task manager, communication tools, and analytics platforms should share information automatically so insights from one tool can trigger actions in others. When your time tracking reveals you're in a high-energy state, your task manager should automatically surface your most important incomplete work. The right technology setup makes extraordinary productivity feel automatic, because it handles the mechanical aspects of implementing these principles, while you focus on the strategic and creative work that only humans can do. The system becomes an extension of your thinking, rather than a separate set of tools you need to manage. But knowing about these tools and actually implementing them successfully are two completely different challenges. Real-world implementation blueprint. The practical implementation starts tomorrow morning with a simple 5-step process that takes exactly 15 minutes. First, open a document and write down every task you think you need to do this week. Don't organize or prioritize yet, just brain dump everything onto the page. Second, identify which 3 tasks would create the most impact if completed perfectly. Third, pick one of those 3 tasks and break it into the smallest possible starting action. Fourth, complete only that starting action and deliberately stop before finishing the entire task. Fifth, schedule 15 minutes tomorrow morning to repeat this process. This 5-step sequence establishes all 3 principles immediately without overwhelming complexity. The 30 to 60 90-day roadmap ensures you build sustainable habits rather than experience temporary enthusiasm that fades after 2 weeks. Days 1 through 30 focus exclusively on identifying and protecting your Pareto zones. Every morning, spend 10 minutes identifying your single most impactful task for that day. Track which activities consistently appear in your top 10% and which ones you thought were important but actually contributed little. By day 30, you'll have clear data about your personal productivity patterns instead of relying on assumptions. Days 31 through 60 introduce strategic incompletion while maintaining your Pareto focus. Start ending your workday by beginning tomorrow's most important task without finishing it. Create incomplete outlines, draft opening sentences, or set up project templates that pull your attention back the next morning. The key is leaving work in a state that creates psychological tension rather than closure. Most people resist this initially because it feels wrong to leave things unfinished, but the Zeigarnik effect makes starting the next day effortless. Days 61 through 90 add systematic experimentation to optimize your approach continuously. Design one small test each week to improve how you identify Pareto activities or trigger Zeigarnik loops. Try different times of day for high-impact work. Experiment with various methods for creating incomplete tasks. Test different environments or tools. Document what works and what doesn't, so you're building a personalized productivity system rather than copying generic advice. Customization based on your work situation and personality type determines whether this system becomes effortless or feels forced. Visual processors benefit from mind mapping their Pareto zones and creating visual cues for incomplete tasks. Analytical types prefer spreadsheets tracking their productivity patterns and quantitative measures of improvement. Introverts often need longer, uninterrupted blocks for Pareto work, while extroverts might prefer shorter bursts with more frequent check-ins. Remote workers face different challenges than office employees. Working from home requires stronger boundaries around Pareto time because household distractions constantly compete for attention. Creating physical cues helps trigger focus states. Specific lighting, background music, or even changing clothes signals your brain that high-impact work is starting. Office workers need strategies for protecting Pareto time from meeting requests and colleague interruptions. This might mean blocking calendar time, using noise-canceling headphones, or finding alternative spaces for focused work. Creative professionals apply these principles differently than analytical workers. Writers might identify their Pareto zone as the specific research method that generates their best ideas, then create incomplete outlines to trigger continuation the next day. Software developers might focus on the coding practices that produce the cleanest, most maintainable code, then deliberately stop mid-function to maintain momentum. Managers might discover their highest impact comes from one-on-one coaching conversations, then prepare incomplete discussion frameworks that create psychological pull toward meaningful team interactions. Common implementation challenges arise predictably and having troubleshooting strategies ready prevents abandoning the system when obstacles appear. The most frequent problem is guilt about leaving tasks incomplete or ignoring seemingly urgent requests. This guilt stems from old productivity conditioning that equates busyness with effectiveness. Combat this by tracking outcomes rather than activities. When you see that working on fewer things produces better results, the guilt dissolves naturally. Another challenge is correctly identifying Pareto activities. Many people initially choose tasks that feel important rather than activities that actually drive results. Solve this by tracking outcomes for 2 weeks before making decisions about what matters most. Look for patterns in which activities precede your biggest wins, not which activities consume the most time or energy. Measuring progress requires tracking leading indicators rather than lagging results. Leading indicators include how consistently you identify daily Pareto tasks, how often you successfully create incomplete loops, and how frequently you run small experiments. These behaviors predict future productivity improvements better than measuring completed tasks or hours worked. Track these metrics weekly and adjust your approach based on patterns you observe. Social and environmental factors significantly influence your success with this system. Family members or colleagues who constantly interrupt high-impact work can sabotage even perfect implementation. Address this by educating people about your focused work times and explaining how protecting these periods benefits everyone through higher quality output. Create physical or digital boundaries that signal when you're in Pareto mode and shouldn't be disturbed. Accountability methods focus on consistency rather than perfection. Weekly reviews examine whether you protected your Pareto time, created effective, incomplete loops, and learned from your experiments. The goal isn't completing everything perfectly, but building sustainable habits that compound over time. Some people benefit from accountability apps that track behavior rather than outcomes. Others prefer human accountability through productivity partners who check in weekly about system implementation. Gradually increasing intensity prevents burnout while building momentum. Start with 30-minute daily Pareto blocks and extend them as the habit solidifies. Begin with simple, incomplete tasks and progress to more complex strategic incompletion as you understand the psychological effects. Start with weekly experiments and increase frequency as designing tests becomes natural. Following this blueprint creates systematic behavior change rather than relying on motivation or willpower. However, even with a perfect roadmap, most people still encounter specific common pitfalls and how to avoid them. The most destructive patterns emerge from 5 specific mistakes that sabotage productivity transformations before they can take hold. Smart, motivated individuals who understand the theory perfectly somehow never achieve the extraordinary results they expect because knowledge alone isn't enough. The first mistake is trying to apply these principles to everything at once, instead of starting with one focused area. People learn about Pareto squared and immediately try to optimize their entire life, their work projects, their personal habits, and their social relationships simultaneously. They create elaborate systems for tracking every possible high-impact activity across dozens of different domains. This approach overwhelms the brain and prevents you from developing real expertise with any single application of the principles. The second mistake is treating incompletion as a productivity hack rather than a psychological tool. People start leaving tasks unfinished randomly without understanding the specific conditions that make the Zeigarnik effect work effectively. They abandon projects halfway through and wonder why they feel more stressed rather than more motivated. They create so many incomplete loops that their brain becomes overwhelmed trying to track everything rather than drawn toward specific, high-impact work. The third mistake involves misunderstanding what championship mentality actually means. Some people interpret this as never caring about short-term results, which leads them to ignore deadlines, miss commitments, and alienate colleagues while claiming they're playing the long game. Others swing the opposite direction and become obsessed with daily metrics while forgetting to invest in system building. Both extremes miss the balance that makes this approach